Hello and welcome to another recorded update ahead of our live webinar series. This session's focused on speaking, listening and communicating, an area that centres have fed back to us during our launch events during the last academic year that they would like more clarification on. So, introductions first.
Some of you may already know who we are, but we do have new people joining us, so it's nice for you to know who we actually are. Also, if you do see us on our networks or any other meetings, you'll be able to recognise us and come and say hello. So here we are with our new refresh photos. Paul, would you like to introduce yourself and your role?
I'm Paul Cassini. I'm one of two technical advisors at Sitting Girls, focusing on maths, English and sometimes employability.
I'm Catherine Cooper, the other technical advisor for Maths, English, Employability and ESOL. And we also have Amanda Kelly, who is our industry manager on the slide, who is busy working behind the scenes. And some of you may recognise her from our Fun Skills launch events or previous webinars.
So Amanda will be joining us on these sessions from time to time. Apologies if you're a veteran to our webinars or our previous Fun Skills 2019 webinars, but for the newbies out there, you can find a lot more information about the reformed functional skills qualifications on our dedicated updates page. We've included a link on this slide that will take you straight there. But you remember, we always will send the slide deck out with the recording shortly after each webinar. This enables you to access the information covered either in the immediate period after each webinar, or you can, if you're so inclined, box set binge at your leisure. Also, if you haven't already done so, please sign up for our email updates. You can do this by clicking on the link that appears at the bottom of every Sitting Girls webpage under Tools and Support, where you can choose your preferences and we'll keep you to date. This will keep you up to date not only with what's happening with this area, but other aspects of Maths and English, and will notify you as and when things change or when any new materials become available.
Let's see what's happened since our last webinar. Our eFunctional Skills Reloaded was released at the end of October. This new package allows centres to just use the initial assessments as a standalone for a small charge without purchasing the whole package. Our regional network meetings have kicked off, and Paul and I are delivering these sessions weekly across the country. We have inserted the link on the page with all the upcoming dates, which can be found on the Functional Skills Updates page. Our current theme is English Level 1 and Level 2, which has run over November and running into December and January. Also, we have started our wave of maths within the December months. We'll be covering the maths Level 1 and Level 2, and that will be running into the new year. We'll be releasing some more dates shortly to ensure we have covered the English region, the English covered in each region also. As we move into spring, we'll also be organising the networks for both subject areas on entry level, but I think Paul and I are actually planning on doing those a little bit earlier, so I think probably more February, Paul. I think we were planning, weren't we? Supply and demand, as it were. And then also for ESOL and employability, again, we'll be starting to release these dates for you shortly. So if you're a Sitting Girls customer and you want to attend these free sessions, just go to the Functional Skills Updates page, choose the Regional Networks meeting drop-down and register on your preferred network meeting. We know our meetings get filled up really quickly, so ensure you register sooner rather than later if you see a date and location that works for you. So now moving on to the main focus of the webinar.
Firstly, I think it's always important to bring everybody back to the subject content statements. These underpin the qualifications. They set out the purpose, the learning aims and the outcomes that learners need to achieve. All awarding organisations' functional skills qualifications must address all of these subject to content statements. Basically everything flows from these. They're transposed into our functional skills handbook document. So on a day-to-day basis, that's where you can find them. However, we have still got on our website a link to the gov.uk site that will take you to the original DFE documents. Just to reiterate and reassure you that we didn't just dream up these criteria. For SLC, as we tend to call it, practitioners really do need to get to know these subject content statements inside out. They are your assessment criteria. They're what you need to base all of your judgments as an assessor upon, no more, no less. As you can see from this slide, there are 8 subject content statements at level 1 and 10 at level 2. Some of the level 2 statements quite obviously build upon the expectations at level 1, just as level 1 builds upon what's expected at entry 3 and below. To help you get to grips further with the subject content statements, we've produced a mapping grid that sets out each one alongside the skills standards from the legacy functional skills and the adult literacy standards and core curriculum. We've highlighted any key areas of new content or changes so you can kind of fairly quickly see some of those changes at a glance.
To also support you in the delivery of this qualification, we've produced a functional skills qualification handbook at entry levels and level 1 and 2. These documents include information for delivery, administration, assessment, performance feedback, and access and inclusion. For entry level, there is also an assessor instructions document, which assessors must have access to at least 4 weeks prior to an entry level assessment taking place. These documents can be found under Centre Documents in the 4748 qualification page. Under Assessment Materials, then desired level, you can find the Assessor Guidance for Speaking, Listening and Communicating. This document will support you in terms of guidance, assessment evidence, and candidate performance and feedback, definitions and timings. Common questions and queries that Paul and I keep encountering can actually be avoided by ensuring these documents have been accessed and understood. So just some food for thought there in regards to what documents you may need printing or highlighting for your staff or peers.
Let's look a little bit more closely at speaking, listening and communicating at entry level. There's one internal assessment to complete at each of the 3 entry levels. In each case, they cover all of the subject content, so all of those subject content statements. At each level, candidates need to take part in 2 activities. At entry 1, it involves making an appointment and then a one-to-one discussion. Entry 2, what we term an exchange of information and then a group discussion. And then entry 3, subtle change of wording, extracting information and an informal group discussion. We do give you some suggestions in terms of topics, but you're absolutely free to choose any other topics of your choice. The only thing to think about with topics is that they enable candidates, or they kind of enable candidates to kind of give them the opportunity to meet all the criteria. One point that's been coming up during some of our networks recently is that you can potentially do some of these assessments in a mixed level group. But we would, I think, exercise a little bit of care over that, because you do need to engineer that in such a way that each learner has the opportunity to meet the relevant assessment criteria. And if you have a mixed group, you're clearly making the assessor's job a little bit more challenging in terms of making sure you're assessing each individual candidate against the criteria that they are subject to.
Next, looking at levels 1 and 2, and we do have worked examples of the assessor recording forms, and they are available on the website to support you. At both levels, candidates will take part in 3 activities: a formal discussion on an unfamiliar topic, a short talk, explanation or presentation on a familiar topic, followed by an informal discussion with peers, and an informal discussion following another candidate's short talk, explanation or presentation. In regards to timings, it is suggested that the formal discussion is around 7 to 12 minutes. They are allowed 3 to 8 minutes allowed for the short talk, presentation or explanation, and around 5 to 10 minutes for the informal discussion.
Earlier, we do now have some worked examples on the website. They're 2 examples. They're described as pass and fail examples to help support you. For the purpose of this session, we're going to use the level 2 example. Just to sort of perhaps just quickly bust a few myths before we kind of dive into that. We don't require audio or video recordings. It's not something that we as an awarding organisation expect or require. However, they may come in handy, they may be useful for larger groups, and they can certainly be helpful in terms of your internal quality processes. But just to be clear, we don't insist upon them. The other thing to be very, very clear about is that the examples, the worked examples we put out here, are examples. They're not absolutely how it has to be done. They're not exemplars. They're not examples of best practice. They may have more words than you might need. They may cover things in a slightly different way from what you need. There isn't a set number of quotes that you need to provide. It's about ensuring that the assessor is evidencing how, and the key word here is how the learner has addressed each of the subject content statements. So it really isn't about quantity, it's about quality of what you put onto these forms. The other just thing that I know often comes up is that a group means the group is always defined as at least 3 candidates, three or more people. The group size shouldn't impede upon the assessor's ability to adequately record those who are undergoing assessment. Worth also saying that the group doesn't always have to include exclusively candidates, but it doesn't have to. It doesn't mean that it shouldn't involve the assessor. The person actually making the assessment decisions can't be a participant in the assessment. We've sometimes referred to completing the assessment record sheets as storytelling. A little bit of myth busting here, because I think it's sometimes a helpful term and sometimes it's an unhelpful term. It's quite a good mindset in some ways for assessors to adopt, because it is about relaying what you've seen and what you've heard, but it is under storytelling in the sense of providing a justification for your decisions. It's not a he said, she said narrative. So when you're completing the record sheet, particularly when you're adding your signature to it, be that an electronic signature or a wet signature, what you're effectively doing is saying, I am satisfied that what I've seen displayed by candidate X reflects the required standard. So it's about enabling the IQA and the EQA to understand and follow the basis on which you reached that decision. If you look at the speaking, listening and communicating guidance, you'll see that there's an overarching statement taken directly from the subject content that talks about, and it uses these terms quite deliberately, consistently, effectively, and to an appropriate degree for that level. Please keep that in mind at all times whenever you're wearing that assessor's hat.
So, looking at transform, which is a form of discussion on an unfamiliar topic. We have put in points to consider to help you think about how you can approach the record sheet. Again, consider your group size so that it is a group where, as an assessor, you can manage to record the candidate evidence. Clear explanation of the activities that sets the scene and gives details of the group, not a story as Paul mentioned earlier. Use quotes given to illustrate the assessment criteria. Assessor comments should provide sufficient evidence of what the candidate said. Learners will need time to prepare for the discussion and to actually form an opinion. The candidate should be informed of the unfamiliar topic in the lesson before the discussion takes place, or a week beforehand, whichever is greater.
Looking at the second task, the presentation or the explanation on a familiar topic. An extended explanation is the term used at level 2. So some points to consider. It's worth thinking about the needs of the learner and their topic. So is it, in terms of format of presentation or an extended explanation, more suitable? It can be either. The setting of the assessment is also worth considering, looking at the needs of your learner, and what evidence are you asking your learners to produce or prepare. Additional notes and observations aren't compulsory. This really isn't about having wonderfully pretty slides, beautiful kind of video clips, but it can enhance the assessor's evidence if those are available, and helps provide support with that justification that I was talking about earlier on.
Now looking at task 3, which has caused a few concerns and questions. This task, once you fully understand the task, can be a natural occurrence of another candidate's task 2. Another example of how this task can be completed is either with the candidate's employer or a video recording. Whichever option you decide to do with your learners, the focus is on each subject content statement being met.
What we would normally do during the live sessions is then open up the floor to questions. Obviously this is recording, so we're not doing that here, but just to obviously be aware that that will normally be something that we will do.
And as usual, you can find more information on the reform on our Maths and English page. For updates page, please go to our functional skills updates page, and we've inserted the link there for you. Questions again can go to the centre support at cityandgirls.com, and also you can follow us on LinkedIn and Twitter using our new hashtag CGMathsEnglish. Don't forget to join us for our live webinars coming soon.
It's goodbye from me.
And it's goodbye from me, and it just remains to say thank you for joining us.